I said. "Justice will be served here." I took my arm back and kept walking. I followed the cinder path around the side of the building. The giant oak trees in the square provided the only real shade in the center of town. I felt 20 degrees cooler the moment I stepped under their branches and took a seat on a bench. I sliced the edge of the envelope with my fingernail. Inside was a single typewritten sheet on gold-embossed White House stationery.
Dear Captain Corbett, the eyes of America are upon you, and upon the proceedings in Eudora. I can assure you that with my own 4 eyes I am personally watching you and the trial at every moment. I know you will continue to do your best, and I know that you will succeed in this endeavor, as we succeeded together during the late war. Ben, know that your president is with you every inch of the way. Sincerely yours, I remain your obedient servant, Theodore Roosevelt, President. I smiled at the president's little joke about his 4 eyes, but when I realized the meaning of his subsequent words, my stomach took a nervous dive, as if I didn't have enough tension to deal with. Now the President of the United States was personally watching me at every moment. I read the letter again and put it back in the envelope. A voice called, "Mr. Corbett, sir?" I looked to both sides and saw no one. Again the voice, "Mr. Corbett?" "Over here, sir. Behind you." Chapter 102. I turned around quickly to find a tall, slender, colored man standing on the sidewalk. He was perhaps 10 years older than me and beautifully dressed, down to the club scarf in his pocket and the jeweled pin in his necktie. "May I have a word with you for a moment, sir?" he asked. "Well, of course," I said. "Come, have a seat." "I'm sorry, Mr. Corbett, I can't. That park is white only." I had forgotten, or maybe I'd never realized, that the old wooden benches, the little fountain, the shade of the big old Eudoras, all were reserved for the exclusive use of white Eudora. I walked across the grass to the man and extended my hand. "Ben Corbett." "I'm a correspondent for the Indianapolis Cross," he said. "Oh, yes," I said. "I've read your paper. Y'all have published some of the best general reports I've seen on the question of lynching." "Why, thank you, sir," he said. "I'm honored that you've heard of us." "Welcome to Eudora," I said. "Oh, it's not my first time," he said. "I grew up in Eudora." I looked at him harder. I rattled around in my memory, but I couldn't place where I had seen him before. "I used to work for Mr. Jenkins at the mercantile store," he said. All at once, I knew him. I said, "Is that Marcus? Is that you?" His eyes lit up. "You remember me?" "I'll be damned if I'll ever forget you, Marcus," I said. I reached out my arms and embraced him. He was surprised, but he let me do it and even patted me on the back. "You were the only one who helped my mother," I said. "You helped me get her to Dr. Frederick. If you hadn't, she might have died." Marcus told me that his family had left Eudora for the Midwest not long after the time of Mama's stroke. They wound up in central Indiana, where his father worked for a cattle farmer. Marcus went on to study English at the Negro Teachers College in Gary and had landed a job with the largest colored newspaper in the state. And now, he said, he had convinced his editors to send him to Mississippi to cover the Raider trial because he had a personal interest in one of the defendants. "Henry North," he said. "I knew him. You did too." "I did?" Marcus said, "Do you remember that red-headed boy that worked with me at Jenkins Mercantile? He helped us carry your mama out that day. That boy is Henry North." Sure. I remembered the loutish boy. He was thin and raw-boned in those days. He had said Mama was drunk to leave her where she lay. "I remember the day your mama took sick," Marcus said, "like it was yesterday. You weren't more than about 6 years old, but you acted like a grown man. You answered old Sanders back like he deserved, and you helped me carry her to the dock. I always knew you were going to turn into a fine man." I was speechless. Marcus's words made me feel humble. The truth was that after years of remembering Marcus's example every day, as my mother had told me to do, I hadn't thought about him in quite a while. "I've paid close attention to your law career, Mr. Corbett, helping people up in Washington, helping wherever you can. When I saw how you were turning out, I tell you, it gave me a little hope along the way." Seeing Marcus again, hearing him speak like this, was a transfusion of energy, as if I'd just received new blood, a whole body's worth of it. Without knowing it, I had given Marcus a little hope along the way. And now Marcus had given me hope for the difficult murder trial that lay ahead. Chapter 103. After careful deliberation, Jonah Curtis had chosen to wear a navy blue suit, a crisp white shirt, and a bright red tie. He didn't look exactly like an American flag, but all the colors were there for the patriotic effect he intended for his opening statement to the jury. "Gentlemen, I did not come to Eudora to make history," he began. "I was sent here by the Supreme Court of the state of Mississippi to seek justice. If in the name of justice you reach the verdict I truly believe you must reach, the state will ask you to assign a degree of punishment that you feel is appropriate for these crimes. Let us begin, though, not at the ending," he said, "but at the beginning. A hot summer night. You know what that means. Surely I don't have to tell you. Talking to a Mississippi man about the heat is like talking to a fish about the water." This little joke brought an involuntary smile to 2 or 3 faces among the jury. So there we are on that hot summer night, sweltering, down in the quarters, inside a poor man's house. And here, on a bed in the parlor, an old man lies dying. His granddaughter is tending to him, his trembles and tremors, his rackety cough. All the men on the jury were watching him now, even those whose expressions revealed their innate distaste for a Negro attorney dressed in a suit. On the porch of this home, there are 2 gentlemen standing guard. These are not fighters or thugs. One is an attorney, well known to the most powerful men in our nation's capital. The other is the inventor of the Stringer automatic bailer, the most successful businessman in Eudora. Heck, let's be honest, in all of South Mississippi. There was a patter of quiet chuckling. Everyone in the courtroom shot a look at LJ, beaming at this description of him. "These gentlemen have come to the quarters on this night," Jonah said, "because the dying man is their friend. They've heard rumors of trouble. They have a well-reasoned fear that some kind of tragedy is in the offing. Lord, it's hot. The old man struggles to breathe. The granddaughter cannot help the tears that come to her eyes. The old man is all she has on this earth." Then there comes a sound, the sound of hoofbeats on the road. There are men on horses, raising a cloud of dust in the darkness. A couple of the jurors looked ostentatiously bored, and a man in the back row was already dozing, but the others seemed attentive, and a few were even transfixed, as if Jonah were telling them a scary story. And that's exactly what he was doing. "Suddenly, gentlemen, all is pandemonium, uproar and violence and chaos,
Men firing guns everywhere, glass flying, women screaming. Suddenly, there are men all around the house, trying to shoot their way in, trying to kill the old man, trying to kill his granddaughter. The old man is terrified. The young woman throws herself over him, shielding his body with her own. The assault lasts only a few minutes, but it seems like hours and hours. Jonah paused. He studied the faces of the jurors, each one in turn. Finally he spoke again, in a hushed whisper. 2 men lie dead on the ground. One is a man who's been a friend and neighbor to you all his life. Luther Cosgrove, an employee of Mr. Stringer for nearly 30 years. He lies dead in the side yard, shot in the face by the men on horseback. The other is a much younger man from out in the county, a fellow named Jimmy Cooper, who had come to that house of his own free will that night and volunteered to stand guard over that dying old man. Jimmy Cooper lies dead on the ground in front of the house. Jonah paused and shook his head sorrowfully, as if he couldn't believe the price Jimmy and Luther had paid. But then there is a miracle, he said. 3 of the killers are captured. For once, they are not allowed to pull on their clan hoods and go riding off into the darkness, unmolested, unpunished. For once, there are men who are interested in capturing the killers, in bringing them to justice, in bringing them here today to face trial before a jury of their peers. And that, of course, is where you gentlemen come into the story. He turned, pointed his finger at the defendants. There they are. Mr. Chester Madden, Mr. Henry North, Mr. Lincoln Stevens. The defendants put on the smirk they had evidently practiced beforehand, but they couldn't hold it. Their nerves and the silence in the room got the best of them. It was now time for the most difficult, delicate portion of the opening statement. Jonah and I had spent hours in the war room going back and forth over this part, trying to find the best way to say what he needed to say. Gentlemen, you may have noticed there is one fact I left out of my account, Jonah said. You may think it's the most important fact of all, and that is the fact that these defendants are white men. They attacked a colored family in a colored neighborhood. One of the men they killed was white. The other was black. I didn't mention any of this to you. And do you know why? I'll tell you why. Because the pursuit of justice knows no color. The pursuit of justice admits only that which is fair and honest and true. This case is not about race. It is not about the black versus the white. This case is much easier than that. It's a simple matter of justice. Now, as the prosecutor representing the great state of Mississippi, it will be my job to show you how these 3 men attacked and pillaged, how they came to the Eudora quarters planning to kill, intending to kill, how they planned and then executed the deliberate, premeditated murder of 2 men on a hot, awful night in the quarters. On a night when these 3 men, and all the ones who got away, were hoping that justice had taken a holiday. Well, justice has not taken a holiday here in Eudora. I heard a sound from the jury box.